Hi everyone, I'm Whitney and I post a new tutorial every week to help sewers of all skill levels learn new projects and techniques. This week I'm showing how I make a basic Jedi costume. I've mentioned before that my husband and I are part of a local group called Jedi OKC, and we dress up in fun Star Wars costumes for different conventions and events, and especially lots of charity events. It is very fun and also very rewarding. So the quickest way to get involved in a costume group like this is to have a basic Jedi costume. So today I'm going to show how to make the tunic and Dickey for the costume using Simplicity 5840. And then this Saturday I'll be showing how I make the tabards and obi, which is the fabric belt that goes around. I custom make mine using the measurements that I come up with and everything. So I'm going to be showing all how to do that in Saturday's video. If you're catching this later than the week it was originally posted, I'll have that video linked down below. You want to start by taking your measurements to figure out exactly which pattern size you need, because they are different than what you wear in a store-bought pre-made clothing size. The back of the envelope will show you how much fabric you need to make that size from your pattern. So you want to get that amount of fabric and go ahead and pre-wash it. One of the fabrics I chose is a linen and the other one is a linen blend. Now, by the way, I do have a pattern reading series already on my channel. So if you are completely new to patterns, there's probably some things in that series that can help you out in addition to this video, and I will have that series linked down below in the video description as well. So it is time to start cutting. With the fabric folded in half the way it comes off the bolt with the selvages lined up, place the tunic back piece along the folded edge. Next to it will be the tunic band. The pattern piece says you only need to cut 2, but that is incorrect. The pattern layout diagram shows cutting 4, which is correct. Pin or weigh down the pattern pieces onto the fabric and cut them all out. Then open the remaining fabric up and fold it in half going the other direction. Pin the tunic front and sleeve pieces on. Each time, make sure that grain line that has the arrows on each end on the pieces is parallel to the selvage edge of the fabric. Cut those pieces out as well. The pattern calls for interfacing for the tunic and Dickey bands, so I popped on my rotary safe glove and cut several 3-inch wide strips to use. My interfacing is fusible instead of sew-in because I find it a lot easier to use. Now, I do try to properly finish all the projects that I make, so the easiest way to do this that I found is to go ahead and read through all the pattern directions ahead of time and kind of figure out the steps where seam finishings need to be completed, because if you wait too long on some of them, you will end up sewing parts together that make it really hard to finish those seams later. So then I go through, read all the directions, and I make myself a little note either on the pattern or on a separate piece of paper marking down exactly when I need to do those finishings. It's time to start sewing, so grab the tunic back and front pieces and lay them right sides or pretty sides of the fabric together so they're matched up at the shoulders. Clip the layers together. Then sew the shoulder seams. We'll be sewing every seam with a 5/8 inch seam allowance unless otherwise noted. Now that the shoulders are together, I like to go ahead and serge the shoulder seams. I also serge the sides of the front and back up to the point where the sleeves will go in and along the sides of the sleeve pieces. I do the serging on them now instead of when they're sewn together because it is much easier. I do want to quickly point out that when I'm serging seams that have not been sewn yet, I am not cutting off any of the seam allowance. I am running the cut edge of the fabric right up next to the blade on my serger so that all it's cutting off is any loose threads that might be sticking out. It's not actually taking any of the seam allowance away, so there is no change in the overall fit and size of this garment. Now it's time to add the sleeves. You want to find the center of the curved side of the sleeve, which is the top side. Match that up with the shoulder seam and clip them together. By the way, if you aren't using craft clips, you really should give them a try. They are so awesome. I'll have the clips I'm using linked down below. Ease the top of the sleeve around the arm opening, matching up the raw edges and clipping everything together. Head over to the sewing machine and sew the sleeve to the tunic body. Repeat for the second sleeve, then serge or finish the arm opening seams in your preferred method. With everything right sides together, line up the other arm seams. Clip the layers together with the seam allowances going in opposite directions. Match up the edges along the sleeve and the side of the tunic. There's a mark a few inches up on the tunic side on the pattern. You want to start sewing there and sew up the side all the way to the end of the sleeve. And do this for both sides. For the sleeves, I like to turn them in one time about 3/8 of an inch and sew around. Then I turn it in again about an inch and sew around again. I can do them this way by sight and not have to deal with ironing over the folds each time. You want to try on the tunic before sewing the sleeves to make sure you like the length. Time to finish the bottom and side splits. Turn each side of the split over by about 1/4 inch or the width of the serging. Then turn it over again like a double fold hem. Add clips to hold the folds in place. Then sew along the sides of the split. Do this on both sides of your tunic. Then we're going to hem the bottom. Fold the edge up by about 1/4 inch. You can press with an iron, but I just finger pressed mine and it worked just fine. Then fold it over again for a double fold hem. And by the way, some of these measurements I'm using for the hems are not exactly what the pattern shows. They're just what I have found to be what I like on this project. Add clips, then sew along the edge of the fold to finish off the hem. Interface one set of the tunic bands and match them up right sides together and sew the short edge to attach. Find the very center of the neckline on the tunic back, match that up with the seam on the band so it is right sides together with the tunic. Then continue down both sides, matching up the edges and clipping the band to the front of the tunic. Sew all the way around to attach. It was right here that I realized the front edge of my tunic had actually stretched some just from working with it, because that front edge is cut on a slant, kind of like a bias, but not a true bias. So it does have a bit of a tendency to stretch or warp if the material's not handled super carefully. So to remedy this, I just cut an extra, I don't know, 6 or 8 inches of fabric for my outer band and inner band and spliced it in. So instead of a center seam at the back of the neck, there are 2 seams near the back. And it worked out perfectly, and I don't think anyone will actually ever notice it. So now on to the second band. I serged one long edge and turned it in by about 1/4 inch. With the right sides together, match it up with the band that is already on the tunic. Sew along the entire long edge to attach and the short sides at the bottom. And make sure you trim the excess seam allowance at the bottom corners so you get nicer points. Open the bands up, then turn the lining band to the inside. You want to press everything with an iron and have the seam allowances at the edge of the tunic body pointed toward the band so the lining band wraps around and completely covers it. After everything is laying how you want, sew a top stitch all along the band to sew down the lining band. I sewed along mine twice just for some extra detailing. So the tunic is now complete and we're going to start on the Dickey. So the Dickey is just a partial layer that goes underneath. So it has the similar collar and everything of the tunic so that it looks like you're wearing 2 shirts, but you're not actually wearing that much bulk on your body. The Dickey body piece is laid on the fold of the fabric. I did not use my fabric folded completely in half like when it comes off the bolt, because that would have created a lot of fabric waste. Instead, I refolded it just a little wider than the pattern piece. And the band needs to be cut out through both layers twice, so you end up with 4 total. Interface one set of the bands and sew right sides together along the short side. After both sets are sewn, open them up and press the back seam. Match the center seam of the band with the center of the small curve on the body piece. Clip all the way around. This is very similar to how the band goes on the tunic. When I'm sewing something like this, where the center point is my guide, I like to start there and sew to the end, then come back to the center and sew to the other end. Open it up and it should be looking like this. As you can see, it looks a lot like the front and collar of the tunic it will be underneath. Turn one edge of the second band in and press. Then line up the non-folded edge with the first band and clip them together. Sew along the long edge to attach. I decided to trim this seam down with pinking shears because this fabric is a little thicker than the other. Flip the band around to the inside and give it all a press with your iron. Then sew a top stitch close to the band seam to hold the band lining in place, the same way we did on the tunic. And I love how nicely finished the bands look on the inside and the outside. At this point, I serged around the entire outer edge. This finishes the edges, but keeps them from being bulky. There's a center line marked on the pattern piece, and you want to mark it onto each side of the Dickey. Match up those two markings so the front pieces are overlapped. Clip and sew them together. The pattern actually says to turn the bottom edge under and hem, but I find that to be too bulky, so I just serge the bottom edge. Grab a bit of twill tape or bias tape and attach one end of each piece to the bottom sides of the Dickey. If you use bias tape like I did, you will also need to sew the length of it to close the open side. So here is my husband having way too much fun wearing his new costume. In my next video, I'll be showing how to custom make your own tabards and obi, as well as how to use some hidden snaps to make sure everything stays in place properly. So make sure you've hit that red subscribe button down below so you don't miss out on that video. And until next time, happy sewing.